For basically as long as fashion dolls have been around, people have been customizing and repainting them. I remember when I first started collecting Monster High back in 2010, it was really common for people to get into the hobby solely to customize the dolls. And even now, there's a huge market for videos showcasing the process of customization and repainting fashion dolls and art in general featuring these one of a kind dolls. However, there's one customizer specifically that's been drawing a lot of negative attention from doll collectors. Her name is Sonia Singh, and she's a Tasmanian artist who started her doll customization company, Tree Change Dolls, in 2015. As the story goes, she bought some Bratz dolls secondhand and decided to give them a make under so as to give them a more childlike appearance. Her story went viral after being picked up by a few news outlets, and she gained an extremely large fan base. To this day, her dolls are still in pretty high demand, and the term tree change has become synonymous with the doll being repainted to have a more natural appearance. The company was already not very popular among doll collectors when it first started, largely due to the media presence surrounding it, but the hate quietly faded away with time while tree change dolls continued to be produced. Recently, though, they've been back in the spotlight thanks to Bratz hitting a huge resurgence in popularity, and a new wave of hostility has headed their way. Now, I do not want to direct any hate to this woman. For all purposes, she seems like a lovely woman who has stated that these dolls aren't intended to make any kind of political statement. She just wanted to repaint dolls to make them appear more like children.
I wanted to remember that it was never my intention to make a particular statement about these dolls. Here's the fun bit. What Tree Change Dolls is all about, though, is giving some old toys a new lease on life and, a more down-to-earth, natural-looking style.
I do, however, want to talk a little bit about why tree change dolls are so reviled in doll collecting communities and why the culture surrounding them tends to get under our skin. While they aren't my cup of tea, I personally think that there is definitely a place in the world for dolls who are more like children in appearance and don't have a heavy focus on fashion or makeup. There were still dolls like that on the market in 2015, and affordable ones too, like My Life As or Our Generation, but I can still see where some parents might have felt like there weren't as many options due to what was popular at the time. So, to that extent, I think Tree Change Dolls had sort of a noble goal. The gap between dolls that look like children and the ones that are more mature in appearance has always been a subject of discussion, even among collectors. The problem lies less in Sonia herself and more in her consumer base. If you looked in the comments of her Facebook page in the first few years, you would have seen a lot of people being very vulgar and demeaning towards Bratz dolls, calling them sluts, whores, and many other words that are just incredibly gross to use to refer to a children's toy. I think Sonia, to her credit, has taken to deleting comments of this nature, or maybe they just stopped on their own, but the culture surrounding tree change dolls, unfortunately, still encourages this. You can still see people say that the dolls look happier or healthier compared to how they did before. People buy these dolls generally not because they like how they look or they appreciate the work behind them, but because they see dolls like Bratz and Monster High as something uh, dirty, simply because of their clothes and makeup. The reason I'm personally put off by tree change dolls is because they aren't born from a respect or an appreciation of dolls. There are so many wonderful customizers out there who do similar aesthetics to tree change dolls, but they do it out of love for the hobby, not because they think the doll needed to be changed or that it looks better this way. The primary audience for tree change dolls isn't collectors, it isn't people who like dolls, or it's not even children. The primary consumers are adults who have decided that a doll wearing eyeshadow means she sends an inappropriate message to children. Some people also take issue with how tree change dolls will sometimes repaint a quote unquote rare doll, but that's not a problem I personally have with them, as Sonia has stated that all dolls are sourced secondhand or donated to her, and I don't really expect her to be able to memorize the individual value of each doll. They remind me a lot of Lamely, a doll produced by Nikolai Lamb in 2014 after a successful crowdfunding venture. She was a doll built with the so called average proportions of a 19-year-old girl. The problem there was that Lamb had no prior experience with dolls or even an appreciation for them, and also made a comment saying that Barbie to him appeared alien like and intimidating and cold. Almost all of Lamley's marketing set her up as the antithesis to Barbie.
Lamely promotes a healthy lifestyle. She is fit and strong. She has style and wears minimal makeup.
She was a doll born from contempt for fashion dolls. For a doll that was supposed to be a warm and friendly alternative to Barbie, her ad campaign was openly hostile and showed no understanding as to what it is about fashion dolls that are so successful. Honestly, that's an entire video in and of itself. Also, not to mention that doll collectors had already been campaigning for years for fashion dolls to be more inclusive with body types. There's definitely a way to have this discussion without acting like a doll's worth hinges on how attractive you find her. In any case, I was one of those people who grew up with a parent who openly disparaged Bratz dolls. My mom refused to buy them for me. She said basically the same thing as you would expect, that they look scary, that they look like sluts, that she can't stand their outfits. Weirdly enough, she did buy me my scene dolls though, so do with that what you will. Meanwhile, I was just a kid. I loved the way they dressed, and I couldn't understand why it was meant to be something bad. It made me wonder if I looked or if I dressed a certain way when I got older, if people would also question my intelligence or my humanity, or if I saw women who looked similar to these dolls, if that meant that they were these horrible things that my mother had said. I just don't think people realize how harmful that kind of rhetoric can be to a child. Maybe you don't want your kid to wear makeup or to dress a certain way because you feel like that would mean they would grow up too fast, and that's fine. I just really don't see how it's so difficult to tell a child that although their favorite doll may look a certain way, it's because she's grown up, and the kid will have to wait a while before they can start dressing that way too. And better yet, teach them that when they reach that age, they deserve respect regardless of how heavy their makeup is or how high their heels are. Again, none of these criticisms are really aimed at Sonia personally. I'm just speaking more generally about the issues I have with the way these kinds of dolls are presented. Dolls with makeup and high heels should be able to coexist alongside dolls that are more childlike, and for the most part, they do. It's just really discouraging to see people build this culture around tearing down fashion dolls and using them as scapegoats for issues that are much more systemic and indicative of society as a whole. Like I said, I do think that there is nothing wrong with more natural looking dolls, especially as they are becoming more and more present in the toy industry. I would just much rather support those, the ones that come from a place of good intentions and an understanding of why people love fashion dolls, than the ones that contribute to a mindset that is so heavily built around insulting women that look a certain way. So, for those reasons, I can't support tree change dolls. I think in a perfect world, maybe these repaints would exist independently from a culture that is just so gross and regressive and be their own wholesome thing, but I personally just can't excuse the overall intent surrounding them. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry if this video is shorter and more ranty than usual. I'm working on a much longer video right now, so I wanted to put this one out in the meantime. Comment your thoughts down below and suggest any topics for future videos. Some of you already have, and I'm definitely making a list and taking them into account. Any and all support or engagement with this channel is greatly appreciated. Thank you. Hi, I'm editing and I just wanted to add a little addendum because there was something I just don't think I articulated well enough. Just so it's clear, I don't think what Sonia is doing is inherently a bad thing, and I don't think she should, like, stop or anything like that. I'm also aware she doesn't necessarily have control over the way the media or her consumers have been framing her work. When I say collectors hate these, I really just mean to say they hate the way it contributes to this culture, and unfortunately, tree change dolls just can't be separated from that. But, like I said, I don't want any kind of hate campaign to come from this. This is all just for the sake of discussion and giving my personal perspective on it. Thank you all so much for listening.